As I mentioned to you in prior occasions, I was at one point for 5 years the Dean of the Cathedral of the Archdiocese in Manhattan. And near the church, there was a office building where Sotheby's was housed. That's where their headquarters, their national headquarters was. So we had the opportunity, if you've ever been in that area of Manhattan, you can walk by Sotheby's and look into the glass encasements that they had, and you could see sometimes announcements of the auction that they were going to have, and other times, if they weren't that valuable, they actually would have items in the window that you could see that they would auction. So we had the opportunity, myself oftentimes with the Archbishop, to be invited to go into Sotheby's and see some very valuable items that were being put up for auction. And I remember one conversation I had, and I asked them, what is the most valuable book that ever was sold at auction? And the curator said, you know, that's a good question, I'll send you the list. And he did send me the list, emailed me the list, and I want to share with you just a few so you see the kind of money that people have spent on books, old books. So a small book of Shakespeare's poems went in the 1980s for $6 million. Just recently, and now they're getting more and more expensive as I go up, just recently in 2014, they auctioned off a book of Birds of America, which is considered to be the oldest book ever printed in the United States. That went for $11 million. A Latin Bible went for $14 million. The Magna Carta actually went up for auction, which is the basis of England's government, as you know, went for $20 million. In today's money, it's a lot more than that. This was quite a number of decades ago. And the most expensive document to have been sold at auction by Sotheby's was bought by Bill Gates recently. Well, 1994 he bought it for $31 million. And it was Leonardo da Vinci's document about his inventions. In today's money, they say it's worth $50 million for a piece of paper, just pieces of paper, not really a book, that talk about the inventions that some of which he actually brought to bear into existence, others were just ideas of his. You can understand why Bill Gates wanted that, as he considers himself to be an inventor of our times. There is another document, however, that has not gone up on auction, and you can see it. I have not had the privilege, but you can actually see it's 3 pages, typed on a very old typewriter that only goes back to 1944. And this document has a list of names on it, 1,100 names, very small paper, typewritten, as I said, and it is in the museum in Israel, in the Holocaust Museum, and I'm sure you are beginning to understand the list that I'm talking about. It is considered to be the most valuable document of the 20th century. And it is, of course, the basis of a movie that many of you may have seen, Schindler's List. Schindler's List. Just to imagine and refresh our memory of what that is. Schindler was a German industrialist, and he didn't like what was going on. He realized how the Nazis were maltreating and killing the Jews. And so he set up a plan, and his plan was that he would take them one by one and have them work for him as an industrialist, and therefore they avoided the gas chambers. Near the end of the war, the camp that he was in charge of or was working with, they decided that they would take all of the people that were there and kill them all. And he devised a plan where he would take as many as he could, and he would tell the Nazis that he needed them in his industries. Not true, he didn't have any real factories, but they didn't realize that. And he said, these are the individuals that I needed. And that was the list. And he got people on the list by actually bribing the Nazis to put individuals on the list. Until at the end, if you can imagine, trains were coming, and he had to divide the people, many of which he knew. And they were dividing the people of those that were on the list and those that were not on the list. And if you were not on the list, everybody realized that you would go on the train and you would die. You would go to be exterminated. So to be on Schindler's List, those 1,100 names was very, very important for your life. Depended on it. In the movie, which is based on the book that's entitled Schindler's Ark, the movie is called Schindler's List, but the book is Schindler's Ark. At the end of the movie, there's a train, and it's full of children and families. And he's trying desperately to try to avoid those individuals from being killed. And he has nothing but to take his own treasures, which he has been using all along to bribe and to put more and more people on the list. And he brings a bag of diamonds. And he gives the bag of diamonds as a bribe, and he's able to avoid a number of individuals from that train, and they get on the list, and he saves them. The train leaves, knowing that they're going to die. At the end of the book as well, he laments. He laments and he cries. And he says something very important that I've never forgotten. And I think it's appropriate for us to focus on it on this day, the Day of Judgment in the Orthodox tradition, Sunday of Judgment. He says, I wish I could have done more. I didn't do enough. I didn't do my best. I had other things I could have given, and yet he gave almost everything that he owned in order to save people. I could have done more. At the end of the war, the Jewish nation gave Schindler a ring, and on the ring was inscribed the following verse from the Jewish Talmud, their Hebrew Bible. It says, and I quote, "Whoever saves one life saves the entire world." End of quote. Powerful, true story of an individual who saved people by putting them on a list. And then at the end of his life, at the end, he said, I could have done more. I didn't do enough. For us as Orthodox Christians, the question is, are we on the list of the book of life of Jesus Christ? That's the question. Today we heard the gospel lesson that he will come one day, those of us who believe, and to judge the living and the dead. He will sit on his throne, and he will separate the sheep from the goats. Of course, imagery here. Like a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And the sheep inherit the kingdom prepared for you. The goats into eternal damnation. Separated from God, you can describe it any way you like. Fire, brimstone. Separation from God is hell enough. You don't need the fire. You're just going in the darkness for the rest of eternity, as opposed to being with Christ. What list do you want to be on? Do you want to be on Christ's list? Because it says all the way back in the book of Exodus, and of course in the book of Revelation, 8 times, that God is writing what we do in a book. And he's going to open the book. The Doxastikon in the Orthodox service, for those of us who was here, actually says that. The book will be opened, and the Lord would look to see whose name is on it, and he will separate the sheep from the goats based on what we do. Valuable book. Much more valuable than Gates. Much more valuable than any book of poetry or book of birds. To have and to be and to know, to have some kind of security, that know that I have lived my life the way I should live my life, and I'm hopefully on the book, in God's book, and when he opens it up, you'll see my name. Now, it's very significant here is that that story, that parable, it's really that historical prophecy, is on the same Sunday in which the church says we begin to fast in the church. And it's not haphazard, it's on purpose, it's there. Because if we were here and heard the epistle lesson, we will have once and for all heard, not from a priest, but from the Bible itself, why fasting is not the most important thing in the church. As a matter of fact, it can be very dangerous if we don't do it appropriately. It says, St. Paul says, whether we eat meat or we do not eat meat, it does not commend us to God. We are no better off, it says, if we eat or if we don't eat. So then why are we fasting, you say? If St. Paul himself says it's not that important, why do we fast? We fast because of the connection to the story of the judgment. Because we are to fast from our own needs, our own egoismo, from our own issues, so that we can help somebody else. Just like Sindler here. The diamonds that we give to God is not how many times I fasted for meat, and whether I had, fasolada or I had lentils, faques, during Lent, and we say, oh, look what I ate, reward me. No. He puts our name in his book because we visit the sick, we take care of the poor, we welcome the stranger. Listen to what St. John Chrysostom says. I looked it up last night. What does he say about that story? And Chrysostom, St. John Chrysostom, he was the Patriarch of Constantinople, and he was talking to his people during Lent. On this day, just like on this day, he stood in the cathedral in Constantinople and he told his people this. Do you fast? Show me proof. That's why they ran him out, by the way. Do you fast? Show me proof, he says. When you see the poor, do you show pity to them? When you see your enemy, do you reconcile with them? When you see other people being honored, do you envy them? Right to us as Greeks, isn't it? And I know there are others than Greeks here, but we have a really bad habit as Greek people. We are envious of others, when they're successful. We don't like it. We don't work and help one another. So for us, this is perfect. Chrysostom says, okay, you're going to start a fast now, you're going to go through Lent. Remember, you want to be on the list, you want to be on the book, you want to enter into the kingdom of heaven? Fast, nice. But if you fast, also do these other things. And he continues. He says, let not your mouth only fast. Not just your mouth to fast, meaning food. He says, but your eyes, your ears, your feet, and your hands. That's why I talked about I lost my train of thought here. Epimanikia to the children. There's a connection to that. How do we use our hands during this Lenten period? To serve one another, to take care of one another, to reach out to one another. Those are the diamonds that we offer to the Lord, not these other things. I hope and pray that as we go through the Lenten period together, you get to know me a little bit more, and I get to know you a little bit more, and we realize that together we want to be on the list to be in the kingdom of heaven. In the gospel lesson it says, he will separate the sheep, he will separate them like a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. How does a shepherd separate the sheep from the goats? There's a way that he does it. His voice. Sheep will always acknowledge the shepherd's voice. The goats will not. So at the end of the day, the shepherd doesn't care during the day. During the day, the sheep and the goats are together. No problem. But at the end of the day, when he calls them, he can separate them just like that. All he has to do is, as soon as the sheep hear his voice, they run to him. And before you know it, the sheep are on one side and the goats are the other. The issue is then, do we hear the voice of Christ? And if we hear the voice of Christ, do we obey it? If we are to enter into the Lenten period and truly experience the new close of Easter, then we need to serve each other with humility, with love, and with patience. Please rise.